that was totally spontaneous. The fact that the filmmaker showed up on that night to film that jam session there was no planning involved at all. In fact, I didn't know. I knew that trumpet player for a long back in the '70s, and I didn't know he was in town playing, I think, Satchmo or one of the shows, and his son was with him or something, and they decided to show up. So, and for that matter, some of the other players as well. So a lot of the things that you saw were just happenstance that you know, the filmmakers were there, but that was happening. That's, yeah.
Jimmy, what about the young sax player, Holiday? What happened to him?
Yeah.
He's living in LA, he's married, teaches saxophone in a little studio, and has a bunch of kids. And he didn't want to come, he sort of gave up gigging, he said.
He also teaches at University of San Diego.
Thank you.
I think it's a great film. I really enjoyed it so much. And it's preserving history that's very important, not only to Cambridge, but to the whole United States. And I really thank you for bringing it, you know, to a new audience, because we need to know the origins and how it flowed from, you know, during that time. And I would love to have this shown, for example, at Berkeley School of Music, College of Music. Yeah, I mean, that would be so, I would love to hear, you know, jazz musicians' responses.
That's how this sort of started was, I guess my wife mentioned it to Robert. Robert saw the film. Robert knows Noah. Noah sees it and he wants to do this, come here to do this, to have this discussion. And I'm going to shut up in a minute, but basically the idea for me is that, you know, it can happen again. It takes a couple of people to get together and say, well, let's try to do this, or this can, it can happen, and it can be done, but it involves risk, and it involves people having the energy to want to do it. You know, I mean, that's really what it was. I didn't want to be doing, you know, playing weddings in New York, and I wasn't cutting it as a studio musician. Bob didn't want to be, he's working at now the Funk Wang Lab as an artificial intelligence guy, and he hated that. And Dennis wasn't, as you heard, wasn't doing anything anyway.
Were you in the film?
Yeah, and I had hair then too.
So just to say, like, this was before my time, and when Xenia told me about the film, I was like, oh, so your husband, you know, had a camcorder, and you owned the coffee shop, and he went over to Riles and shot him. You know, I had no idea this is a piece of gold.
Really?
Yeah. So.
Riles was there when you were there. I remember they were across the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question about this landlady. She obviously didn't want you there. So this must have been ongoing, right? That she gave you a hard time?
Well, okay, so here's the backstory to that, which is in actually one of the articles. There's some of it's in the article about how that panned out. But basically, her older brothers owned the grocery store next door, which is now, there's an Irish pub and a couple other places like that. And I think actually the Lily Pad is there too. And they were fine to deal with. They gave the property to the Mrs. Carabino, who became our landlady, and she gave it to her elderly mother, who was 90 or something, and lived behind, and they did not want us, particularly, if I might say so. One of the things, all right, in the court testimony at the eviction hearing, so the lawyer, so what is the reason? You know, one of the reasons was, and I'm sitting there and I couldn't believe it. She said, this shit. Well, there were black men and white women kissing in front of the place.
What?
So the judge goes, Mary, are you sure you want that in the record? and she just kind of looks up, what? But it was, you know, it was, for us, it was just, it was almost comic that these things that would go on. And we were able to, we had a very good lawyer, and who actually was the babysitter for one of my partners when he was younger. And he basically said the way it went down was that we didn't have a lease, and because we didn't have a lease, they couldn't give us eviction and then raise the rent. They had to raise the rent, and then we said we couldn't pay.
Oh.
So we were able to drag it out for 5 years in court, and that's how that went down.
Did you guys try or think about opening up a new spot, or once that happened, was it just sort of
Well,
decided not to?
my partner was burnt out from the whole thing, basically, physically and mentally. And at the time, I was newly married, and there was going to be another undertaking and a major financial commitment, which I don't think I was capable of doing at that time. So, something like that.
So, no, what would be the appeal? Would you play at 1369?
Would I?
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I got questions.
Sure, go ahead.
They're more like kind of nitty gritty questions.
Go ahead.
For example, how do you get someone like Henry Threadgill? And I have an idea. Who I think he's like a MacArthur Grant, Genius Grant winner, and these are people who are like on the highest level, New Yorkers or whoever, Andrew Sorrell. How do you get them to come up from New York all the way up to Boston for, I don't know what the money is, but it can't be, like Symphony Hall money.
No.
And I would assume maybe they're just an assumption, but maybe you weren't giving them hotel rooms.
No, that's not true.
Oh, you were giving.
I'll tell you. Why don't you?
Okay, so all I'm wondering is, I mean, I played at Hole in the Walls in cities you've never heard of and probably wouldn't want to ever hear of, and I played large festivals, in China, and I just find that some places are able to get musicians to come for really, really bad amounts of money. Very low kind of. I'll give you one example of a place in Boston. There's a place called the Sahara Club in Methuen. There's a guy named Jocko who books this venue. Has anybody been to the Sahara Club? Okay, it's in, I don't know if you know Methuen, but it's in the middle of nowhere. And you have to get there around 6 o'clock for a 7:30 show, and traffic from Boston to get to Methuen is just a freaking nightmare. So it already sucks to play there. Not a lot of people go. The audience is all over probably 70 and above. And the money is not good. But Jocko has been doing it like every Tuesday night for 20 years, 25 years. And he's a really great guy, really loves the music, really cares about it. So people do it. People do that gig. I did it last week or 2 weeks ago. So anyway, there are ways to kind of like get a scene happening where even if the money isn't fantastic, people are still willing to do the gig. So I'm just kind of curious, I mean, how you were able to get people like Threadgill or...
My recollection was, I think we called them up on the phone. I'm pretty sure it was things like that was how that went down. Or we got their number from somebody, right? And as far as the money goes, I know that we lost money on a lot of nights when we had those kinds of events.
Right.
Okay. Break even maybe, we lost money. Certainly it wasn't a drinking crowd like you say. It was people were 70 and older back then. Okay. Plus, we also talk about money, and it was 35 years ago. So
That's the other thing I was going to mention is having a venue in Inman Square in 2019 is a much different situation.
that's correct. That's correct. I mean, there's inflation, and then there's inflation. It's like there's relative price inflation, and then there's the actual exorbitant price inflation. But the thing was, my recollection was we called these people up, and or, usually, I think there were a couple of times when we dealt with agents for people. I'm trying to remember, I think maybe Joanne Brackeen and some of the real bigger mainstream names, probably dealt with agencies, and we would pay them, but the blues jam session and the Saturday
They
night,
kept you
the
open.
Saturday thing kept us open.
Right.
I was the jazz purist, my buddy Bobby was the conceptual guy, and also he loved blues. So it was a compromise, and it's easy to, when the cash register on Sunday afternoon at 7 o'clock is overflowing with money, and there's coffee cans and beer mugs filled with cash, you can become more accepting of the compromise that you're making artistically.
Right. The other thing, on the other side of it, not just from the venue owner's perspective, but it's a lot more expensive for jazz musicians to survive today than it was in the 80s. So, you had like the whole loft scene in New York City where people were living for a couple $100 a month.
Right.
And they're getting paid exactly the same that they're getting paid today.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a harder world to live in as a musician.
In terms of audience, was it any more popular in the 80s than it is today, or is it pretty much,
Well-
it's still, in terms of album sales, like jazz is maybe 1%.
If you look at what was happening economically in the country in the early 80s and in Cambridge and the Boston area, the high-tech industry was just really starting to take off.
Mhm.
You have 5, 6 universities, you have 3 major universities that could within walking distance. So you had people, baby boomers with money, who didn't have families, most of them, a lot, and were not averse to, and came out of the 60s being very actively involved in listening to live music.
Mm.
So, there was a perfect storm, so to speak, of things concurring to have that happen. That place had been a jazz club, had been a music club, jazz club, actually, for some years before, on and off, with some mixed results.
Mhm.
And I remember going there in 1971 when I first came up to Boston, and it was a fighting bar. In fact, fights broke. There was no music there. Fights broke out when we were sitting there having pitchers of beer. We all had long hair. We're sitting over in the corner, and all of a sudden the mirrors are getting shattered.
Oh,
and
no.
breaking beer bottles.
Yeah, so
So-
just into new management, and you get
Yeah.
guys, yeah.
Yeah. So.
I didn't want to jump straight into the money conversation
Go ahead.
about it, but it's just interesting because, I don't know what I was thinking, but, so I'm a player, but a few years ago, I was talking to people at WICN in Worcester about having a radio show, and I wanted to do it because I got a bunch of friends who are in the business, and I thought it would be interesting for the public to hear their perspective. Like late night conversations or telephone conversations I would have with them about why things are tough or how we think things could get better, or just other musicians' perspectives that I really value. And one of the people I interviewed first was this guy named Bruce Ferrara. He books this club called the Beehive, which is in the South End. And they have a sister restaurant in Cambridge in Harvard Square called the Beat Brasserie. Right. So Bruce is a good guy. He's been doing it since they opened maybe 13 or 14 years ago. In fact, I played opening weekend at the Beehive. And I remember there was a 4-hour line to get in.
Imagine that.
But it's a restaurant. It's not a jazz club. It's a really cool place.
There's no quiet policy there.
There's no quiet policy
I
there.
was there about a month ago to hear George Garzone and John Lockwood,
Right.
and it was as bad, if not worse, as it was a year ago when I heard Jerry Bergonzi
Right.
and George Garzone and Frank Tiberi.
Yeah.
And that's to
People aren't
say we're
listening.
doing the right thing, but there's no quiet policy.
So Bruce, just like, so he's in a different situation because he doesn't own the place.
Right.
But it's a restaurant first and foremost, so it's a different thing. But so I wanted to interview Bruce because I really wanted to push him on how can we develop more of a community in Boston, and how does he do it? How does he bring in okay, for example, like Levano or Fragranza or Garzone, or brings up some people from New York City, doesn't give them hotels, and pays maybe $400 or $500 for the whole band. And he said, well, you know, sometimes I'm able to pay a little more and we lose money, but I also get, like, they have reggae night on Sundays or Mondays, and they have blues night, and they do much better. So it's like a give and take with the owner. He wasn't able to give me any kind of explanation for how to build a jazz audience in Boston. How to build an audience at a club. And so, I mean, every time I kind of push him with, like, building an audience, how do you do this in Harvard Square? There's got so many students, you have so much money, you have such a big arts scene in Boston, you have a jazz festival, which I think now doesn't exist anymore. You have, you know, there's a huge community of people.
I got an idea, all right?
Yeah, I would love
So
to.
this is how, essentially you gotta have jam sessions. Jam sessions bring in people of all kinds of abilities, and right away you're gonna start getting people coming. I'm telling you, the jam sessions could be all over the place sometimes, but you get some control over it, and you could have a really nice scene happen for that. Second part of that is that people meet each other and they form bands. The third part of that is that one of the things, the key ways we brought in bigger name acts, not all Henry Threadgill's thing or Archie Shepp's band, or for that matter, having some of the bigger name solo acts on pianos. We had jazz guitar series. We built series of events actually. Also, my partner's conceptual guy. We're going to have a organ jazz series. We got an organ, B3 organ, from a guy who played locally. We gave him a gig, and he let us. And basically let us use his Hammond B3 organ, and we brought B3 organs. We had a jazz guitar series. So people knew every Wednesday night for the month of August, every week on a Wednesday night there was going to be some jazz guitar player. Larry Coryell, Mike Stern, whoever it was going to be there. We did the jazz piano series. We had Baldwin pianos. Took that thing that we had up there on the stage for this thing. They moved in their Baldwin. We had the Baldwin on the front of the stage. Joanne Breck-Keane and all these other big guys, Barry Harris, and all these other people came up and did the jazz piano series. So my partner's thing conceptually was that it needs to be sort of like a menu. People could select. We had a jazz tap series. We put an extension on the stage, and we had tap dancers coming. You know, and the other thing is that we had some local sidemen like bass players, drummers. Or for that matter, piano players or horn players. Who would you like to play with? And who do you know and who would you like to play with? I'd really like to play with you. Well, if you can get them to come up, we'll pay them and we'll figure out something to how to pay you. So again, you had the bigger name stars coming up to play for reasonable money that they didn't have to take it, they could say no. And you had the new people playing with the more established people who all of a sudden now are going on tour to Europe and they can't find somebody to fill in the spot, and all of a sudden that person gets that gig and that starts their career off. And there was a lot of that went on, cross-pollination really, that went on because of that. I didn't think that was the strategy, that this is going to do it, but it made the place very viable and that people would show up there spontaneously. And trust me, getting the $7 cover charge out of people back then was really tough. You think, you know, $20, $25, $30 cover charge, I mean, it's like beyond, but, you know, I pay $1 to come in to hear the jam session. People, what are you talking about, $1 to come in here? I ain't paying $1.
Yeah, you know, I entirely agree with you. And because, like, I've been trying to start a bunch of different series in Boston over the past, I've lived in Boston a total of 10 years, just split into 2 different 5 and 5 at various times. What I've found is that to get students and players out, you're absolutely correct. They need to have something in it for them, other than just seeing great music, which is sad, but it's the reality. I think that there absolutely could be another club like this club, a present day, you know, version of it. There has to be more reasons for people to come. A jam session is a great idea and it has to happen. I play at Wally's every single weekend with a trumpet player named Jason Palmer. He's been playing there every weekend for 20 years. And they have a jam session every day of the week from like 4 to 7, another one from 7 to 9, and then we play from 10 to 1. It's also free to get in, that helps. And they just charge like, $6 for a soda water or something if you don't drink. But, so that's one thing. Also, I really do believe that there could be a really happening jazz club scene in Boston. We kind of have all of the pieces. There has to be something else to it though. For example, there's a jazz club in New York City called Smalls that I play at a
Love
lot.
Smalls.
And Smalls is in a great location in the West Village. It's got couches, it's really cozy, there's cats that run around. It's sort of reasonably priced. They have incredible musicians. Yeah.
Well, they also had a precarious existence. They shut down for a while. It was a nail shop, and then they opened again.
Right. Yeah. The guy.
But now they're good.
The guy who runs it now, Spike Wilner, is a pianist himself. So he a good one, and he understands what good music is. So I was in Korea a month or two ago. I played at a place in a little town called Gwangju. Actually, it's a big town for them, but relatively a small town. And we played at a club for like 60 people, and it was jam-packed with people under the age of 40. Because it was also a social gathering. It was a way for younger people to like meet each other in this arts community, and they build it as that. I play at a place in Vancouver. It's a total dump called Pat's Pub. It's in their tent city. I mean, it's like it's horrendous. You walk outside and you're like scared for your life. But every time I play there, it's been packed because it's a social gathering. It's inexpensive, and somehow they're able to get great musicians to play there. It pays okay. Anyway, most cities have these places that thrive because there's more offered. It's like some sort of like a special combination of things. In Boston, we don't have that. So, which is sad, but I think it's possible. And so I think somebody needs to open a venue and really like think out what can make it a special place by incorporating, a few different things that, we can go through the clubs one by one.
Would you consider opening a venue? No?
Absolutely not.
No.
See, one of the things that we kind of touched on, but the real estate thing is a real big deal. That place was a bar already. 1369 was a bar already. All we had to do was buy the inventory and the liquor license, and those guys wanted out. And we moved in. So it's gonna be a little more complicated unless you have somebody, my partner Bob went to Trinity College or something with one of the guys, the 3 guys that owned it. They were all business executives. It was kind of a plaything, a tax write-off for them. They couldn't care, or they couldn't care less about it. And, I mean, as far as I could tell. And, so it was kind of easy to step into in that regard. But no, I was talking about, one of the things he mentioned is that it's more complicated now to get some kind of venue like that going, I think because of the licensing. I mean, we had a 2 o'clock license, that's, I don't know who gets that nowadays, but we had a 2
I don't think you can in Boston.
Well, in Cambridge, we had a 2 o'clock license, and it was like Thursday through Sunday was 2 o'clock, and that was like a big deal, because we could have shows that ran 4 to 8, and then start one 9 to 1 or 2, not that things that happened after 1 a.m. anyways, this makes things a little bit more tenuous, but anyways, or challenging. But anyways, it's the real estate thing is one thing, the licensing is another, and all the expenses that go with that. We were told, you're gonna go to see this lawyer, you're gonna pay him this much money, and don't ask too many questions. And that was it.
Unfortunately, the real estate thing is insane in Boston. You know, it's one of the most expensive cities in the world. And so, it would take somebody with a lot of money to start it, and I think that once it was started, as long as it was being run with somebody with a great imagination and knew the right people and, you know, the things fell in line, it could work. There's another, a good example of that happening is, there's a great jazz club in Connecticut, miraculously, in southern Connecticut called The Side Door. It opened, I don't know, maybe 7 years ago. There's a guy named Ken who owns it. It's in an inn in Old Lyme. He lives down the street, and his family like owned Coca-Cola's like Northeast distribution company or something. I don't know. You know, the guy's a zillionaire, and he's a huge jazz fan. He's an amateur drummer, and it's a jazz club in his living room, essentially. So he's able to pay really well, and it's close enough to New York City and Boston where you can get a lot of great musicians. He doesn't even have to put them up. And so that's kind of, you know, he made it work that way. And he breaks even.
Yeah.
He's at the point now where he breaks even. He was losing money, and now they're doing all right. And but he doesn't need to worry about money. So that's his situation. So.
But we weren't worried about money either, because we were single, bachelors, we needed to pay our rent and gas for our old Toyotas, and that was pretty much it. We had a rent control apartment,
Yeah.
you know,
It makes life
it
easier.
was like, you know, and that was it. I mean, we felt happy, fortunate that we were able to get what we put into it out of it. When we sold out, we just sold the liquor license for the money that was, what was, we paid for it, and that was fortunate.
Yeah.
But,
If we're talking about clubs, not in Boston, there's a club in New Jersey called Trumpets.
Yeah,
And
Montclair.
I heard, I used to sing there 25 years ago. It was a really happening place. And it kind of went downhill, but I just heard it's for sale. One of my friends called me and says, you know any rich people? Because Trumpets is for sale. So it's in a great area. In case anybody knows any rich people in New Jersey, it's up for.
You're all bringing up a great point. If you have, about the side door and Ken, if you have the money to start, if you have the passion for music, you want to treat musicians as they should be treated, voila.
Right.
We don't have that here in
Well,
Boston.
you know, so you've been how long have you been at Scholars?
7 years, but I've been a jazz fan for 40.
Okay, but you've been on the
Yeah.
inside at Scholars for
Yeah.
a while.
Who are you kidding?
Yes,
Your age again.
So
45.
I would love, Marla, I would love your opinion or your story or your, you know, your expertise or your whatever on how come there's not like a community hang at Scholars.
Well, here's the thing, if you don't mind me to talk a little bit about it. You know Jan, she's a friend of yours, and that's exactly what Jan's trying to create. Prior to Jan, the club, the set was over, quick, get those checks down, get the people out. Jan comes in and one of the first things she says is, I wanna make this a hang. And she's doing what she can, but if you don't get it's the same thing she gives, nobody's ever given 50% off to the students.
Right, so
Yeah.
Jan gives a discount, she's tried busing students over.
Absolutely.
Tickets are half price for kids, so it's $12, they can split a cab, and it costs almost nothing from Berkeley or at Newman
Right,
Conservatory.
so a $40 ticket to see Benny Golson, they can go see him for $20 plus their transportation.
Right,
But who showed up for one of the greatest jazz musicians? Not enough people.
so why? That's, What-
Generational thing, I think, you know, meaning, and you, as you well know, because she's booking a lot of great musicians who are much younger, like you, like Marquis Hill, like Keon Harold. You know this. I see a lot of the same folks coming in because she's trying to create that and a hang.
well, wait one second, but there's another part to this. It's what's happening in the music scene generally in the country, and also what's happening in the schools and school bands. all that. I started
Jan
playing,
brings up,
I started playing in junior high school, you know.
Jan is not only bringing in the students, but she does one thing that is so successful it sells out right away. Wayne Escoffrey brings up a big band in a bus from Yale University, and then Yasvani Terry brings his big band, and they call it Battle of Big Bands, but it isn't. But here's all these incredible kids where I've been listening again for about 50 years.
Yeah.
And, 55. And my jaw drops at these kids. That's my passion too.
Yeah, yeah.
And Jan's doing that as much as she can. And if you remember, the club is in a hotel.
I
Yeah.
was just gonna say it's corporate, so
Yeah,
that's a
so
whole
thank
other
you for saying
thing.
what I was.
Well, I didn't say
But,
that.
and one other point away from that for a second, I think it's just that it has good times and bad times, because when I was a kid and living in New York, I'm living in New Jersey, but going to New York with every paycheck I could, the Vanguard had 3 sets a night
Yeah.
on Fridays and Saturdays. And the times were 9, 11:30, and 1, I believe. Now, they changed the times, and there's only 2 sets on Fridays and
And
Saturdays.
they charge like 3 times as much.
Right, now, and I'm asking for your expertise or yours, I've gone with Jeannie, every time I visit in November for a family reunion, I go with Jeannie to the Vanguard on Monday night, and the lines around the block. So I don't know what the formula is.
Well, for the Vanguard, Smalls, 55 Bar, Birdland, Blue Note, and
Right.
Kind of Smoke Uptown,
Yeah,
they're in the tour guide, they're in the tour books.
Right.
So, I mean, I remember I played at the Blue Note one week,
mhm,
and the first night we played, it was my first time playing at the Blue Note in New York City. And there was nobody there for the first set, and the second set, for some weird reason, was slammed. And so I said to the manager, I said, why was nobody here the first set? Like, that should be the set where everybody's there, and the second
Right.
set's empty usually. And she said we had like 3 tour buses come in.
happening to us now too, not as often as New York,
She said it
but I've been
really,
getting calls for that.
Right.
she said you could be John Coltrane, or you could be a middle school student, it doesn't matter who you
We
are.
we had 40 people come in they were touring from Israel one night.
Right.
And they had a great time, and maybe that opened their eyes and their ears, but that's not helping it. And I am a little bit of a cheerleader for what Jane's doing, because she's really trying, but you know what they say about a new business, you gotta give it a few years and get the word out, you know, that, hey, they're doing things differently, they're keeping the lights on, they're not telling you, get out. But if.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing, part about it is getting the word out was really easy for us because nobody was doing what we were doing. So
Yeah.
we had all the writers from the Globe, the Herald, the Boston Phoenix. Now, they were all trying to tell us what they wanted to have us do too.
Right.
But that's okay, but, you know, so we had a lot of free
And
publicity.
word of mouth of what a great night it was. There
Well,
was a
yeah.
vibe there that was different from anywhere else. You know, I know
But-
you closed before Scullers opened, but Riles was there and.
Riles was there, and, look, we did a lot of things that were strategically very sharp. I mean, we
Mhm.
would book ahead of, like, what was happening over at the Regatta Bar. We would, if they were gonna be there Wednesday, they would be Monday at our place, you know.
Wow, there
For
were
half
no
a month.
pauses yet.
Well, we were,
60 miles.
my buddy Bob had no scruples about that, and I kind of thought it was pretty sharp, because you pay $30 over in the Somerville Theater, $20 over there, and you could pay $10 over to see them over at us.
Yeah, and if you have a limited income and you know the place has a good vibe to it, you go to your place.
And,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, he did it a number of times. Canceled the jam session, as I might add, with a little bit of resentment there, so that they could bring
What were you
in
gonna
the.
say,
I was
Judy?
gonna say, there's a place in Philly that reminded me just visually of your place. Mickey Roker used to play there all the time, and Trudy Pitts played. Does anybody remember that?
Chris's?
Chris's.
No,
It was
no.
before Chris's. Ortlieb's.
Ortlieb's.
Yeah.
Ortlieb's. That was like a long, skinny place. It was crowded and tiny and smoky, and
But there was a
but
vibe
it was
about it.
packed. It was
Yeah.
always packed. It was a great place.
The thing about Boston is there is no, and I love Scullers, I play there.
Oh, I
I'm not, you know, hating on it whatsoever. But there isn't like a club.
Mm-hmm.
Scullers is more of a concert,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
concert venue.
And both the
Sure.
Orbar and Scullers are in hotels.
That's something that's something my wife points out to me all the time, is that you could go walk into this place any night, and you're gonna probably see somebody you know, you're gonna be able to hang out with somebody, you're gonna be able to talk to the musicians when they're on their break, you're gonna,
Where everybody knows your name.
wherever you are, you're gonna pass them when you're on the way to the restroom, or to use the payphone, or you're gonna, you know, or it was absolutely that intimate. And to Noah's credit, that's what he just said about having it be a club. So you have it's a business, but it's also what they were talking about up here, a gathering place and a social place, and you have to have, that's what really makes it happen. Now, it's not possible that there's not a location and people with resources to pull something together like this, again. It's not possible. I just think that there's a lack of motivation, actually, and on people who do have the resources.
But doesn't it go again back to being able to rent a space at a price that at least lets you get the thing off the ground, where you're not paying $5,000 a month?
Well, I would say that we were paying like $800 a month. Now, of course, it's 35 years ago, but.
Cambridge, right where the Charles Hotel is, when I first moved up here, I worked at American Express Travel, top floor, and we moved out of there and I found out they were gonna charge $5,000, and I gotta tell you, it was not a big space. So that would be my fear, because believe me, I work at Scullers and I'm a cheerleader for Scullers, but I'd love to see another club. You know, because we'd have a different thing, different people, and maybe stir the pot a bit, you know.
Well, they opened that venue, Bebop.
Yeah, but
on
there's
Boylston
not
Street,
really, it's not
but-
a jazz venue, right?
Right, and I got excited about it, obviously.
Me too
But-
as a fan.
Me too, as a fan.
Yeah, there you go.
But it's like you can sign up on the website to perform there. I mean, that's not like a real jazz venue or concert venue. That's like stupid. So, but there is no club in Boston. So this is the perfect time if somebody has a real estate connection or knows somebody who has opened a club before with experience and knows a musician or two that they can collaborate with to kind of like find the appropriate music to present there. It's a perfect time. I mean, Wally's is not. I mean, Wally's is Wally's. I don't know if you got anybody who's been there, but people talk really loud, and it's not a real. It's whatever. It is what it is.
It's really small.
It's really small too, and Scullers isn't a club, and Regatta Bar barely has music anymore,
It's true.
and Lily Pad is a pay-to-play venue. Unfortunately, I mean, he's a great guy, Gil, who owns it, but and the other one across the street, Ronald's, which you could hear flamenco or whatever they had upstairs dancing while the concert was happening the whole time anyway. It's like they had a club upstairs. So, but they're gone. So
That was a missed opportunity over there when we closed, for them to take over that whole scene.
yeah,
But one of the points Jan also brought up, you want to have a place where people, they know they're going to get great music, but they don't necessarily say, I only want to see Joey DiFrancesco. Because you want the place to create such a vibe that people want to go because they know they're going to get good music anyway. Again, the days of Bradley's, I'm old enough to have gone to Bradley's. When I walked in there, nobody even had to say hello to me. It felt like home.
right.
That's Smalls,
That's-
feels like home.
Smalls, it's a strictly jazz club. They
Yeah.
don't even really have blues. It's just a jazz club. They have straight ahead jazz. They have slightly more avant-garde jazz, not really, but it's a pretty straight club. But it's comfortable. People like to go there. It's hip.
Late Roy Hargrove, how often did you
Yeah, he
see
was
him
there
going in there
all the time at
just
2
to
o'clock in the
hang?
morning.
And you see
And you
where
can be
jazz
there
is
till
great
like, what, 5 in the
musicians.
morning?
Yeah, all night.
Yeah.
I mean,
So-
Smalls they let musicians live there in the back. It's like a,
And the guy that draws those,
The good old
those
days.
pictures
right,
of
he
music.
also,
And then with Mesro, you can just go down the street and,
On one ticket,
Right.
which I think you should
I think that's
make it two. It's great, but I wish as a fan, I would pay more money. Because he lets you go back and forth. But one night on one of my visits, I went to Mesro to hear Dana Stevens. I heard Ronnie Huber at Smalls, and then Russell Malone at the Vanguard, kind of like this triangle in one night.
Right.
And all three places have a great vibe, and you're right, unfortunately, and I can tell you, looking right in the eye, and you know Jan, she's trying to create that, but you need the people to come out, and you need them.
So why aren't people coming to Scholars?
This is my great mystery.
See, that's, Bruce Ferrara couldn't answer that on the radio show with me. You don't know why?
Don't know
Why?
I don't know why.
It's
no.
not money, that's the thing, because
No.
especially with the students, they all spend on their parents' money anyway.
And like Jan told me, because I don't think Uber, I drive all the time, she said 4 kids can get it, 3-4 kids can get in an Uber. And
Right.
again, I
It's
just
like $3
picking
each.
somebody, Benny Golson's ticket was 35, you get to see him for 17.
Well, I think the big thing is advertising and word, getting the word out that this is what can happen, because I think one of the things that happened with us was, listen, I used to go around with, people don't do it anymore, printing up flyers and calendars and going around and putting them in parking lots in Harvard Square and on parked cars' windows.
That's
You know.
illegal.
Sure, it's illegal. Everything fun is illegal.
Guess what we're doing? We have a part-time marketing person.
No,
who's
but I was
doing
just
that.
saying,
Yeah.
we used to do that, and then, you call every newspaper up and say, this is what we're doing, we're gonna start changing things. You have to get the noise happening, where we're creating this whole new thing, and eventually it could happen. I'm not saying it will, but I think that,
Or with a new venue,
or with the
You
new
know.
venue.
and doing it right from the ground up. There's no reason why, as long as you're patient.
Yeah, but
you know.
we didn't have a new venue. We had an old venue that was mismanaged.
Good point, yeah.
We had an old venue that was mismanaged and all this, but there was a core nucleus that used to hang,
Mhm.
kind of. But then you just kind of start changing it.
Yeah, and we have had a lot of compliments on the changing of the, getting people like Noah in. I'm the one who the comments typically come to first, and they've been very positive, but that's still not providing an answer how to get more of those people to come in and say, hey, I heard Noah. Hey, I had never heard of so-and-so, Keon Harold, but wow,
But so if you want to get this, you have to do something on whatever the social media for the students is. You have to get on there.
One big problem that you didn't have to deal with is the internet and YouTube and free streaming. So, especially with students, it's a different story for, I think, adults who still, I feel like, value seeing a live performance and having that intimate situation with music next to you, in front of you and surrounding you. But for kids who are now growing up looking at YouTube and not really experiencing a live
Right.
concert,
Mhm.
I don't feel as like it's, an important thing for them to do, to go see Keon Harold at Scholars.
right.
They can watch him 2 inches from their face.
Same thing with Smalls. I love it for me because I'm from out of town now. I don't live there. And it's great to be able to pay
You can
$10 a month and
Stream it online.
Yippee, and then the archive, if it's too late for me, a few days later I can go and, so that's great. But yeah, if people are doing that from their homes, that's scary.
I think this is a really interesting conversation because every week for months and years, I've been going to all kinds of music. And young people are packing the Sinclair, they're packing a lot of venues, and they're spending a lot of money. So it seems like the issue is, why isn't jazz packing them in?
Right.
They got the money, they're going. Every single day of the week, these places are absolutely jammed with kids. And they know the songs, but why isn't jazz, which is so amazing, so wonderful, why isn't jazz on their menu? So I think that's a big question.
That's a big question. And the discussion was sort of touched on with Archie, and I was talking yesterday about it. Classical music didn't become orchestral music all of a sudden. It evolved out of folk music, European folk, and as the instruments became more as technology changed the quality of the instruments, and people started expanding their abilities, and so composers started writing things, expanded their abilities, and jazz started as, as basically saloon dance music, and then we evolved into big band dance music, and it was popular, very popular dance band stuff, and as the musicians evolved, they started taking more solos, and then they decided that they were gonna really expand on the solo thing, and their artistry and their technical ability improves a lot, so you started to have smaller groups becoming not dance, to become like art music, and it becomes art music, and unless, we have $70 million to have the Lincoln Center for Performing Jazz, you're not gonna have it. It's not gonna, that's kind of.
It evolves, right? You have like, it combines with techno nowadays, like Caravan Palace fills the House of Blues, and that's jazz.
Well, I've heard some John Coltrane things on some of those, like, guys that spin their discs. I said they were playing some John Coltrane and some other stuff. I forget who it was.
Yeah.
Whatever. I
They
said,
sample Horace Silver all the time.
Yeah,
on the,
well, right, I heard that too.
And it's also cyclical. In the 90s, we had the swing revival, and there was a great venue in Toronto, the Reservoir Lounge opened, and that was packed, and it attracted talent.
That doesn't doesn't answer your question of why not why jazz. It's possible that it might not be jazz's moment, but I don't know.
It seems like there has to be some way to get jazz back on the radar, because jazz is fantastic.
There are certain people who, like Kamasi Washington,
Yeah.
but somebody handed him $500,000 because they thought he was, exceptional. They heard him playing at a bar or something, and they said, "Here's $500,000. Make your epic. Hire the most expensive, incredible PR person that you can find, and get famous." That doesn't happen to like us or anybody really. That's so.
Very true.
And he also had done a little bit of recording with this person, with this guy Flying Lotus, who is huge in the electronic music scene.
Mhm.
And it's really sad actually how somebody in the electronic music scene who is up and coming can have 1 million followers on social media, and the most highest level jazz improviser who's could have 350. It's so screwed up,
You can't just go commercial.
as you said. But so yeah, there's something about jazz that's really unappealing. So maybe obviously, I don't know if it's because you can't really groove out to it a lot, or because it's so heady, or
I think both of those things have played into it. Because if you look at kind of how people shifted in terms of standing and listening to music, sitting and listening to music, and then people just wanted to move. So you have clubs where people can dance, but to sit and take something in that's more intellectual, even though it's supposed to be rebellious and cutting edge. That seems like it goes counter to that. Lisa, I'm gonna put you on the spot and say, why don't you think, why not jazz? Because you go to clubs, people want to dance.
Well, I was gonna say, I was itching to jump, but then you totally nailed it. What I was gonna say about the instant gratification of social media, and in general, people don't have a need to go experience things really anymore, and that's this, and it's something that's very prevalent. Our generation is everything's online, and the people who become famous and recognized are sponsored on Instagram, and then they get promoted via Instagram, and then they get hired for. One of my friends who was just went to Coachella out of then performed at Coachella, and it was just from fame and promotion via Instagram and techno, and also what you were saying, or someone, I forget who said it in the video, had said that they said kids listen to, what was it when they said that the program that they go, where's the drum, where's the phrase,
Right.
and I know that for me, I listen to primarily hip hop, and that's what I gravitate to, because that beat and that repetition and that movement and dancing, right? You know what I mean? For me, jazz, I can respect it and be that's really amazing, but it's not I don't. When I'm driving with my dad, he's all over the place, hitting the steering wheel, so into it, and I'm lost, and it's just
well,
yeah.
We're also talking about two different things right now. We're talking about why is jazz not popular, and how to make it more popular, and we're also talking about venues.
Venue.
Right.
And I don't think they're necessarily connected.
No.
I don't think they go hand in hand. But I think that in terms of a venue, I think I believe that Boston could have a really great music venue, jazz venue. I think that it just needs to be freaking cool.
Mhm.
That's
Cool.
what every one of the clubs that I've seen in every single country, all over the world, has in common, is they're freaking cool.
Cool.
They're cool places to hang for young people, for old people, all sorts of colors of people, just welcoming, fun, cool places. A lot of them are social kind of gathering spots where people do pay attention to the music, but like if they want to stand all the way in the back and be kind of like quiet and whisper to their friends, they can do that. And there's great music. So great music, really cool, somewhat affordable. I think that if it has that combination in a centralized location,
Mhm.
it's totally possible. But all of those cards kind of need the,
And I think that sometimes it's also that it can be contagious, is that if somebody goes to, look, I grew up listening to classical music or whatever, and folk music in the 60s, it was rock, which I didn't really like that much, and so when I heard jazz, I really snapped right into it right away. So that was me, it's not everybody, but I take some turns, hey, check this guy out. And then somebody else says, hey, let's go check this out. And before you know it, I'm down at listening at the back door at the 5 spot. Manhattan, because I can't get in, I'm too young, whatever. So, you start listening at the back door, and then one thing leads to another. But that's the other thing. People would bring other people. You got to check this place out. You got to check this place out, and that's how it happens. And that's how it would happen if there was a happening venue. Just like I said, it has to be freaking cool. This place was very cool.
yeah, there's a lot of people outside hanging out.
Hanging out.
Blues music is cool. Jazz can be cool.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about there being like options of like you can sit and watch, or you can like dance to it, or you can like be off in the corner doing your own thing. I think that it's like right now in Boston, it feels like it's either a concert or it's not. It's either a concert or it's like the Burren. You know what I mean? It's like something that's very much like not, people aren't watching it necessarily, but it's like in the background of the venue.
Yeah.
So I think it's like really cool it would be really cool to fuse the two in a way. That's something that I really just like don't think is there.
Well, the other thing is that we had 40 hours of music a week. 40 hours. Because at the end, we had some guys who played hillbilly washed up bass and harmonica coming in from 4 to 6 with their group.
So, all right, I don't understand the business side of this. How were you able to afford, so either the times are just so different where rent for you is super cheap and musicians were getting paid enough, but I just don't understand how you guys were able to pay that many musicians.
Those guys didn't require a lot of money. It was a couple of hours, and they weren't going to get any gigs anywhere else. So it didn't really matter. They wanted
to be there.
They wanted to be there, and they were there. And then they would form a group, and then they'd be at the blues jam session, and then those guys would have a group, and they'd have a blues band somewhere down, playing on Nantucket or something. And actually, one of the washed up bass guy, he played actually the harp, or I forget what the thing is that buzzes, what it's called.
Right, yeah.
Anyways, he became quite famous on that, from what I heard.
Isn't it called the Jews harp?
Jews.
Yeah.
So,
But how do you make something cool? What comes first, the chicken or the egg? What comes
Well-
first, the coolness of the venue, or, you know what I'm saying?
But
It's
let me
like-
backtrack,
Yeah.
so we had a couple, 3 or 4 guys, washed up, Robbie, I think was the guy's name, he played washed up bass. So he'd bring his 3 guys in, or 2 guys, or 4 guys, whoever would come, from 4 to 6. And then we had the regular night show would come in, or then on Saturdays we had the Shy 5 reggae band, that was by part of his girlfriend's band, and they packed the place, all day long on Saturday until the night show would come in. And the same thing Sunday with the blues jam session. So it became not just jazz, obviously. But it was always a place it was always happening there. There was something always going on. You know, we had to change the day situation a lot too because of the clientele. But
People sleeping at the bar
well,
by
there
2
was
in the afternoon.
a lot of that. You know, when we first bought it, it opened at 6 in the morning. The night shift guys would come in and start drinking.
Jay, most of the people who came walked to the club. I know that we
Yes.
did you find, because I think that whenever I talk to people about going out, or the thing that keeps you from leaving is the parking. Parking, the driving, and we've done things at the Lily Pad, and I've tried to do poetry events, because that's my passion, and even as centralized as that is, people won't come because it's just too hard to park. So I almost feel it's like you've gotta get that hip place that looks like a classy dive, but that's perfect real estate where anybody can walk to, because I think people felt like it's a summer night, they know something's going on. They're gonna leave the house and go over. But it's that, the transportation, the parking, the traffic, I think is like one of the main things that no matter how cool a place is,
Totally.
keeps people from
That's
wanting
absolutely
to.
correct.
You know,
Maybe.
Either having public trans or people.
Public transport is, yeah, but like we were talking about with scholars,
Horrible.
I mean, there's no transportation. It's,
My
Yeah.
speech is 15-minute walk from Central Square. Is there a bus? I'm sorry, there's no bus.
yeah,
But we do
but,
have a great garage if you have a car.
Yeah.
yeah, although that garage sucks. I mean, it's like
Yeah, you know,
$15 to park there, even if you're at the show,
Yes,
that's lame.
yeah, and again,
There's no,
corporate,
there's no
Yeah.
stamp for people.
No, they stamp it and it's still like $10 or $15.
yeah, it's 15 now.
Yeah.
I have a really funny story about the Village Vanguard. So Brad Meldau was supposed to play in January of 1996, and he had to cancel. And I knew the person that was booking it, and I ended up getting booked at the Vanguard with my band for a week. It was the blizzard of '96.
You know, blizzards are an excellent way to get gigs.
I was-
I had a week-long gig at the blizzard of '78.
There you go.
Oh, that was
But
rough.
3 of the nights that I played there was nothing, there was no cars on the road. And I would call Lorraine Gordon and say, I guess you want to cancel, right? She's like, no, we got 75 people coming in on whatever. And I'd be like, oh shit. And I'd have to go in, and it was
That's right, too, yeah.
packed. And I thought, New York is empty. You'd go on the street and you'd see the snow coming down. Ray Drummond couldn't even make it one of the nights. He couldn't get in from New Jersey. I had to play without a bass player. And still we were there playing, and it was packed. Because you can walk there.
Yeah.
Right.
No, you know, they wouldn't have been at
That's a good
Trumpets,
point,
but,
actually.
so, you know, if you can find a venue that's walkable.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. So, I tried starting multiple series in Boston, over the past 5 or 6 years. The most recent one, I played every Sunday night at a music store called Virtuosity. It's on the corner, it's right across the street from Symphony Hall. I don't know if you knew where Rayburn Music was, but it's right next door to that. So the location is amazing. It's directly in between Berkeley and Newton Conservatory. There's a train station on that block, on that corner. The place is really nice. They have really beautiful leather couches that you can sit in. I brought whiskey and beer every single Sunday for free for people. I hung up flyers in all of the colleges in town. I have a mailing list of 7,000 people I sent it out to every now and then. It went out to all the mailing lists at the colleges. You know, for the music departments, they send out email blasts, a lot of them weekly, that tell you what's happening in town. And I could never get more than 15 people.
It's
Jeez.
amazing. It
For
sounds
over a
perfect.
year.
I've been, it was great, you know.
Never more than 15 people.
That's insane.
And I'm not a huge rock star at all. I'm not even a huge jazz star at all. But, you know, I always have special guests. I always had friends coming up from New York City who happened to be here anyway or whatever and do me a favor. I could never get it really happening. The place was not huge. I mean, it's like the size of this place, you know,
You said you did it for a year?
I did it for over a year.
On Sunday afternoon, Sunday night?
I tried different times, but usually around 7 or 7:30.
That's hard to believe. I mean, Boston, you'd think that So
Especially your
you know,
location.
Exactly.
So why?
That area is not very residential, so people,
Kind of.
I mean, people work there and then they leave.
Well, you got all
Or
those
they
apartment
could.
buildings, they're right around the
There's a
corner.
whole, you have
St. Paul
like,
Street and all that.
St. Paul Street, the south end is 2 blocks away. You have dorms for Berkeley, New England Conservatory,
Conservatory.
Wentworth, Northeastern,
But if it's a bar, they might be too young to
no bar.
go.
This wasn't a bar, it was a music store.
It's a music
It
store.
was very cool. It was,
I
you
brought
know,
booze.
leather,
Which is
overstuffed
illegal,
leather
but-
furniture.
I mean,
and nice-
hey,
yeah.
Really
It sounds
small.
perfect.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, not a lot of room. I mean, but when there were more people, we set up chairs. I mean, like, we made it work, you know, like this. But why? Why not?
Well, maybe we should look at things like what does work? Where are there places that people are crowding to? What, maybe don't even think about jazz, just think about where are the places that the kids, and I'm saying kids, but people, what works?
What
And
clubs
then-
in Boston do work?
I don't know, because I live in New Jersey, but I'm just
Okay.
wondering, that might be, instead of looking at it that way, look at it the opposite way.
What, you brought up Sinclair? Was that-
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big.
But that's a bigger venue. You
Yeah,
know,
a small place like Passim is now,
Passim is the
is
other one.
absolutely getting, every night is.
But that's
absolutely-
because,
almost sold out
what's
lately.
his
What do
face?
they
But they have,
there?
there's folk, they're folk.
It's
No,
fu- I mean-
all the musicians are promoting those gigs at the Sinclair, at Passim's. Those are the musicians, bringing all those people. They get some people just because it's Passim's, or some people just because it's the Sinclair.
Yeah, but the Sinclair,
Yeah,
there's
but-
the restaurant and the concert hall, right? They're
Yeah.
two different.
But it's, I mean, I don't know. I mean,
Did
I
you say folk? I mean, are people
Yeah,
listening
that's-
to folk now?
They are
You
into
know,
folk, a
folk,
lot of
like
people, maybe
a
the
couple
older
guitar
generation,
players.
but I mean, people are, and you know, the interesting thing about the Sinclair is, I don't know these people who were on that stage, I've gone, everyone in this crowd, they know their songs, they're singing them, I mean, you know, it's like they have their
I mean,
cohort.
jazz music is less popular than Celtic music.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so it's like, you know, folk music has got jazz beat by, you know.
Yeah.
Well,
Which is why there's seems like a Celtic bar next to where the old 1369 used to
I
be. Where
know.
it could be a jazz place, and it's a Celtic bar, for goodness sake.
wow.
But there is a lot of fusion. I mean, you're finding jazz being incorporated to every single kind of music,
Well,
and even jazz players.
that, yeah.
Yeah,
'Cause it
well,
wouldn't
you know,
work.
maybe it's fusion.
Also
That
because,
was-
They like it.
because it's exciting to bring,
Yeah.
you know, disparate elements together.
I just
I mean-
saw the Black Violins, I don't know if you've heard of this group. They're drawing a huge crowd, they're doing a fusion thing with music that's really amazing, where they're creating, they're taking classical and all kinds of elements, and they're throwing in, you name it.
Well, you see, that's
And
the
It's
point.
really amazing what they're doing,
The
though, I
point-
mean, I've never seen this done before.
The point, I think the point is that it doesn't have to be, quote, unquote, I went into this as a jazz purist, and then we had poetry and jazz, we had this and this, and that, and we had fusion, and so I think that it doesn't necessarily have to be just jazz, you can build it as, you can build it as jazz, as a jazz club, but it doesn't necessarily have to be just jazz. It can't, because jazz is essentially an improvisational based on popular, the way I understand popular tunes, and then of course it evolves into a whole other thing. And I think you can have a venue that's going to be new music venue, and jazz is new music. It's going to be new music for a lot of people, but still, I think you need the location where people can walk into.
I mean, the bar in New York City is that most closely resembles your club. It's called the 55 Bar. It's on Stonewall Street, so it's got a huge amount of foot traffic. And it doesn't advertise itself as being a jazz club in its title. It's the 55 Bar. And they have music, you know, twice a night.
Right.
2 bands a night, and they charge $10 to get in, which isn't a huge amount for New York City at
Right,
all.
it's fantastic.
Drinks aren't stupidly expensive, and it's a total dive, you know.
Sounds good, let's go.
So, I mean, like, how do they do it? You know, Is it because it's New York City? Is it because it's in West Village? Is
I
it?
think New York has the advantage over every major city in the US, you know, because I used to go to LA a lot back in the 80s, and I'd go to Catalina's, and I'd almost always have to buy my tickets in advance for Cedar Walton, Billy Higgins,
Yeah.
stuff. And now it's really, and I talk to musicians that I know, young and old out there, young and older, and it's a very dead, depressing scene out there, other than the Blue Whale, and
Right.
you know, so I think it's just going through that time, and that's why somebody does need to go in there and do something, you know.
Alright, so who here knows somebody who owns real estate?
There you go, see, yeah. Unfortunately, sadly, I don't.
It's too bad, but maybe one day.
Well, I don't know if we come to any conclusions, but,
What about the Charles Mark Hotel?
what's that?
That's in town. My first cousin is a partner with someone else there, and they're right across the street from the Boston Public Library. And I don't know if they have a place to, you know, for performances, but it's right there in the middle of
Yeah.
Congress Square.
That sounds good right away.
Yeah.
And,
We could have that conversation.
okay.
I mean, I work out at the gym with the woman who owns Trident Bookstore on Newberry Street, and she's really hip, she's awesome, and she wants to have jazz music. She's like, I just don't know how to make it work. You know, we're a bookstore, we have to do sandwiches, you know.
Again, and I guess also until word of mouth gets out enough, you have to have some kind of a marketing advertising budget, like you were talking about with the Globe. I don't even know if the Globe is the right thing now, but you have to have something, digital marketing or something.
Do you have to have
Budget.
alcohol, would you say? Is that a necessity?
Absolutely.
100%, yeah. I mean, and that license is
And that's a whole
ridiculously
other, I
expensive.
mean, that's, you know.
What do those cost nowadays?
I think it's over $100,000, you know, a year,
A year? A year?
a year.
Wow.
You know, you have to have, like at the Beehive, for example, I think you have to have even also like a dance permit,
Yes.
which is nuts too.
What kind of permit?
A dance permit.
A dance permit.
We're talking about like 1950 or something, it's like insane.
No, we had the liquor license and the music entertainment.
How much does that cost? Remember?
About 20 grand.
No, I think it was, the total was probably, for the whole place, kit and caboodle, the license and all was $50,000.
And you, not per year.
No, once.
So you only bought a license once.
Yeah, I'm sure we had to pay some kind of a fee every year, but it wasn't
Okay.
anything like that. I would have remembered if it was something like that.
Yeah, what's crazy is I played at a jazz club in Lexington, Kentucky, and their liquor license was $3,000 a year.
Oh, wow.
And that's like, you know, it's made there, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And here it's, I mean, it's stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, yeah, it's a payoff thing, absolutely, for the licensing. But you can't make it, that kind of money,
Right.
I don't think.
It doesn't seem-
Got $100,000 a year, I don't think you really have to do some serious stuff.
Well, I think that's what people are faced with. You know, you're gonna,
That's a lot of bottles of beer.
100 bottles of beer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Things are just so much more expensive than they used to be. I mean, you know, I was when you said the same thing. I said in 1981, when I first started